Ellen and I will each read two of our essays today. I'm going to start off. This first one is called Wives and Lovers. Of the many things that divide generations, music has to be at or near the top of the list, and the division begins to manifest as the younger generation enters the teenage years. My personal experience with this was quite predictable because I was born in 1941 and as a result was 15 years old in 1956 when Elvis's Heartbreak Hotel first played on the little clock radio in my bedroom. That was also the year when Elvis appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, and the elders became aware of his dancing as he sang, the lower body movements that were described in one newspaper as an exhibition that was suggestive and vulgar, tinged with the kind of animalism that should be confined to dives and bordellos. I could not have cared less about his gyrations, and the lyrics of his songs were pretty pathetic, but the rhythm and musicality were spellbinding, and I remember thinking, the very first time I heard Heartbreak Hotel, that music had changed forever, and I thought it was changed for the better. My parents detested the early Elvis, but Mom became an ardent admirer and fan after he served in the Army, recorded gospel songs and Christmas carols, and showed the world that he was devoted to Gladys, his doting and beloved mother. Rock and roll was the musical genre that divided me from my parents, and in the 1970s, heavy metal was what divided my sons from me. In both cases, it was the sound, the beat, the feel that brought about the separation and caused the older generation to fear for the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health of the younger. But in between were the 1960s, and when I look back at some of the popular songs from that era, it's apparent that they were, and should have been perceived as, much more offensive and hugely more harmful. It wasn't the sound, which was smooth and bland, designed for baritone crooners so that they could sing and smile at the same time. And it wasn't the rhythm. Nobody was inspired to dance to it. It was the lyrics, the misogynistic, women-trivializing, paternalistic lyrics, the lyrics that misrepresented women's potential and worth, just as Barbie dolls misrepresented the size of their bosoms relative to their waists. The phrase little girl was used to diminish adult women in exactly the same way boy had been used to diminish adult Negro men. Consistent with the belief that the only reason for a girl to go to college was to catch a good husband, the lyrics of the 60s were portraying the expectations of girls as limited to drawing the attention of a boy. If you think I'm overstating the case, consider the following. In 1962, Marcy Blaine released her one and only big hit, Bobby's Girl, which began, "When people ask me, what would you like to be now that you're not a kid anymore, I know just what to say. I answer right away. There's just one thing I've been wishing for. I want to be Bobby's girl. I want to be Bobby's girl. That's the most important thing to me." Apparently not satisfied with having created a unidimensional female character who wishes for just one thing, the songwriter goes on to have her declare, "And if I was Bobby's girl, what a faithful, thankful girl I'd be." Still not finished, the writer now reveals that Bobby, the object of this poor girl's total devotion, is involved with another. So, each night I sit at home hoping that he will phone, but I know Bobby has someone else. Rather than manning up and moving on, she can only hope for divine intervention to cause Bobby's current relationship to fail. And we hear her say, "Still in my heart I pray, there soon will come the day when I have him all to myself." The song finally winds to its depressing finish with still more affirmations that being Bobby's girl is the most important thing to me, and if that were ever to come about, what a faithful, thankful girl I'd be. Demonstrating that the writer wasn't seeing what he wrote and that the character in the song wasn't listening to what she sang, she repeats her one and only wish. "I want to be Bobby's girl. I want to be Bobby's girl." How did the parents of teenage girls allow that song to become number 3 on the hit parade? Why weren't their newspaper editorials fulminating over the insidiousness of these training bra lyrics, condemning the obscenity of demeaning girls in such a way. Just 6 years after the adult nation worked itself into a lather of indignation over Elvis's pelvic thrusts, how could those only slightly older parents and guardians have failed to perceive the threat to the psychic well-being of young females from such a demeaning portrayal? Well, perhaps it was because the women of that era had succeeded in becoming Bobby's girls and were content and faithful, thankful that their wish had come true and now determined to hang on to their Bobbies. Did I hear somebody say, too much, you've gone too far? Well, just keep reading or listening. In 1964, Jack Jones recorded a song written by Hal David and Burt Bacharach titled Wives and Lovers. In today's world, we might expect the lyrics to be about wives and about lovers, not necessarily in that order. But the message of the song was instead advice urging wives to add lover to their list of duties and responsibilities to their husbands. It was a big hit, and the version that I remember was by Frank Sinatra. But it was also covered by Andy Williams and, not surprising given her lifelong battle with feelings of inadequacy despite her talent and beauty, Julie London. The song begins just before the husband is due to arrive home, doubtless expecting dinner to be ready and the house perfectly in order. Hey, little girl, comb your hair, fix your makeup. Soon he will open the door. Don't think because there's a ring on your finger, you needn't try anymore. For wives should always be lovers too. Run to his arms the moment he comes home to you. I'm warning you. Did you notice that last sentence? I'm warning you. Just because you're married, don't assume you can trust that part of the wedding vows about as long as you both shall live, because he's got options and temptations that his very nature excuses. Day after day, there are girls at the office, and men will always be men. Don't send him off with your hair still in curlers. You may not see him again. For wives should always be lovers too. Run to his arms the moment he comes home to you. He's almost here. Okay, we have girls at the office who are a threat to take your man. And you're still a little girl married to a man. So how do you deal with the threat of those girls at the office? The song suggests, hey, little girl, better wear something pretty, something you'd wear to go to the city. And dim all the lights, pour the wine, start the music. Time to get ready for love. Oh, time to get ready, time to get ready, time to get ready for love. There you have it. There you see the circle completed, as the girl whose only wish to be Bobby's girl is now Bobby's wife, albeit still a little girl. Bobby, in contrast, has become a man among men who will always be men, meaning that the other girls in his life, the ones at the office, will find it easy to take him away from his little girl wife if she doesn't do the late afternoon seductress number every time he walks through the door. Apparently, the girls at the office would prefer to be the stay-at-home little girl wife, and they're ready and willing to break up a marriage so that they can trade their office clothes for a June Cleaver-esque dress and apron. But as Bob Dylan told us, the times they were a-changin', and by the end of the 60s, the feminist movement was coming into being. Bras were symbolically burned, or not, perhaps just tossed into a trash can, depending on what you read. And women were beginning to demand equal opportunity, equal treatment, and equal pay. The pendulum swung quickly and widely as women rejected the taken-for-granted roles that had been their only options, and as they began to refuse to do what their predecessors had always done. The change was captured in a single line of a song I heard on the car radio in the early 70s, sung by a man who sounded both puzzled and sad. When a woman who could cook still would. No more little girl and no more Bobby's girl. A woman. And it's Ellen's turn.
And now, for a change of pace, even though Phil and I have really always been city people, We did spend 16 years in the country, here in North Carolina, in a rural county just north of Durham County. And that exposed us to a lot of new and interesting things, different kinds of experiences, and this is one of them. The name of this piece is Squirrels for All Ages. Remember Squirrel Nutkin, that charming creation of Beatrix Potter? Mr. Brown, the old owl who lived on the island of nut trees, did not think him charming at all. In fact, Nutkin was rather impudent, showing off his luxurious tail, throwing out rhymes and riddles while teasing Mr. Brown, and stealing his walnuts. Nutkin was the only squirrel I knew anything about until we moved to the country and planted fruit and nut trees. Suddenly, all the evil twins of dear Nutkin found us and dined greedily on our cherries, blueberries, and pecans on their way to their favorite dessert stand, our bird feeder. Squirrels know how to avoid baffles and traps, approaching the feeders like gymnasts and well-trained burglars, knowing exactly where to step and when to flee. All our neighbors suffer the squirrel plague too, so we can commiserate and share trendy deterrents like the recipe for a concoction of jalapeno peppers, onions, paprika, and cayenne pepper that you're supposed to spray around their hangouts. If it doesn't work, you can put it in chili. Other people are sharing amazing videos on YouTube where squirrels make extraordinary leaps, get into tiny places and out again, take off a metal lid and chew it into shreds. We can see all this without even turning on the computer. Phil has never been a hunter since he shot a bird as a boy and felt bad about it. But self-defense is another matter. He started putting out have-a-heart traps and catching squirrels almost daily. He would drive them to the next county and let them out very close to Black Snake Park, where he'd been relocating black snakes for years. But were the folks in Granville County simply re-catching those squirrels and driving them back? Surely not. We hoped they were putting them in old-fashioned Brunswick stew. Maybe that gave Phil the idea. His Granny Baer was known for being able to serve anything she could catch. I always thought that meant fish and rabbits maybe, but squirrels may have been on the menu as well. In any case, Phil was following a family tradition when one day I came home after a day in town and he proudly announced that he had had squirrel for lunch. He said it was so fine that next time he was going to invite our neighbor Jim to join him. Jim was a retired physician who strives still to live off the land. Jim still talks about how good that lunch was. Now, not long after the men in our community had discovered squirrel as lunch meat, we got a call from our friend Marge, who lives across the road. She said that she had caught a squirrel in her trap and asked her then 8-year-old grandson if he'd rather take it to Granville County or cook it and eat it. Tyler didn't hesitate. He wanted to eat it. Marge asked if Phil would be willing to show him how to do that at our house, not hers. Well, Phil has a firefox mentality, and that's foxfire mentality, and loves to teach old skills before they fade away. Tyler is a perfect student, patient and smart and interested in the outdoors and all its gifts. When he first moved to North Carolina with his family, he had just turned 4 and was already eager to fish in the pond. All the adults in his life provided assistance and encouragement, and that included Phil, who showed him various techniques, expressing his surprise that a child his age had enough patience to fish for hours at a time. Tyler continues to impress us with his fishing skills and with his fish cleaning skills as well. When we had a young visitor from Colorado, Tyler took him down to the creek and showed him how to catch a crawfish. They didn't eat the crawfish, but it was not surprising that Tyler wanted to eat the squirrel. Phil showed him every step of the way, from animal in trap to animal on plate. I stayed out of the kitchen until lunch was ready. Then I found leftover potato salad to serve with the braised squirrel and joined the squirrel eaters at the table. I admit that the meat didn't look bad in the iron skillet, but I stuck to the potato salad. Phil realized that he should have let the squirrel stay longer in the refrigerator so the meat could relax, and he apologized for its being a bit tough. That didn't seem to bother Tyler. He used knife and fork as long as he could, and then he picked up the whole leg and gnawed the meat right off the bone. Today, there are reports all the time of kids living life at a distance because the internet lets them see things as if they were there. Whether it's a wild horse stampede, a cat rubbing noses with a dolphin, or a cook showing a child how to prepare squirrel for lunch. These incidents are all real, but only the last one happened at my house. Nutkin himself didn't go unpunished for his misdeeds. Mr. Brown tore off his tail because that's what some owls do. That's pretty harsh unless the alternative is being cooked and eaten by an 8-year-old. That's what some little boys do.
Yeah, Tyler turned out to be a real outdoors person, and like bread on waters. Since I taught him to eat squirrel last year, he brought us a 10-pound strip of venison. It was excellent. Changing pace yet again. This one is called Go Outdoors and Play. And it starts with a quote from William Blake from Auguries of Innocence. To see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. I've never had a quiet mind. I used to try to sit and try to meditate, but I never even made it to monkey mind, that mind that chatters as it swings from thought to thought, while it shakes the branches and hurls handfuls of fruit or something worse. No, the better analogy for my mental state was an entire jungle full of monkeys, ones that were trying frantically to escape the full-on attack of an army of all known monkey predators. Then one day I came upon the first hint that there was a way for my mind to be quieted. I noticed that it would go still for a few moments when I was bird watching. It happened when I stood motionless, waiting, with my binoculars focused on some small dark patch of branches and leaves where I'd seen a bird alight to rest or feed, until it stepped out into a shaft of light and showed a bit of itself, perhaps a wing bar or a spot of color on the head or on the base of the tail, the ring around its eye or the shape of its bill. There was nothing to set my mind spinning, no data to churn, nor clues to analyze. When, at last, my patience was rewarded, my mind would begin to digest the small bits of information it had been fed and slowly re-engage with its assignment to identify the bird. If not a totally quiet mind, it was at least an orderly one, remaining focused on a single task, and for that moment I was one with my surrounds. I was connected, calm and at peace, my mind engaged in something part meditation, part contemplation. I pondered those brief experiences of quiet mind, so different from the tumultuous mind that always rose within me on the meditation cushion, and an idea slowly formed. Although I'd never been able to find my mind's off switch, perhaps I could throttle it down by choking off all but a single sensory input. When bird watching, while only looking, my mind was content to slow, to idle, and bide its time. What other sense, I asked, could bring about such quietude? My mental monkeys turned and screamed as one, "Try listening." And thus my practice came about. I found a way to meditate, a way to be with just my breath and one thing more, to experience a quiet mind even when there was no hidden bird to work its hypnotic spell. I find a place, perhaps beside a woodland stream or the little pond along our gravel road, where I can stand and listen. I close my eyes and take in every sound that I can hear, first those in front of me, then behind, then on each side, until I feel I've heard them all. Finally, with measured breath and balanced stance, I listen to all the sounds from all around until they blur and blend, combining into a hum, a buzz, or just a sigh, nothing that my mind can take apart and analyze, no food for thought. I stand within, a part that is no longer apart, connected, making nature whole. I have no sense of dominion, no thought of any other place, and no need to alter what is there. Now, at times, without intent, my quiet mind comes unbidden, most often when I'm in the garden. The heavy boots, gloved hands on the long wooden handle of shovel, rake, or hoe, the rhythm of turning the earth or opening a furrow, cultivating along a row in the still cool morning, these bring about a way of feeling, touching, a sense of connection that serves as looking and listening do. This way leads me to the quietest mind of all. Until I shake and come awake, come back to consciousness of what I'm doing, my mind remains so quiet that I don't even know it's there. My shadow has grown shorter, the row is longer, and so I know that time has passed and I have been at work. But I have no memory of the passage or the effort, and I smile at my monkeys as they awaken. There are grander, more dramatic ways that nature calls us to attention. Howling storms and crashing seas, lightning bolts and shooting stars that cleave the dark sky, great canyons with their thundering waterfalls, majestic mountains capped with snow or clouds. These quiet others and bring them to a state of wonder. Now, I understand their response. Lord knows we all need a good humbling from time to time. But for me, these dramas are a bit too much. Because I can't assimilate and contemplate them whole, they stimulate and activate my analytical mind. I dissect them and try to understand the pieces, stand apart and analyze and seek to comprehend. Like Blake, I've learned to find my place, my connection to the universe, in a grain of sand or a shovelful of garden soil, in a wildflower or a bird, or in the sound of the wind as it works its way through the pines. They're brief and rare, these periods of quieted mind that let me be for one more time an innocent, a child at restful play. I hope the last won't be my last, but if it is, if I've had my share of quiet mind times and get no more, I've no cause for regret. I've held infinity in the palm of my hand. Look, listen, feel. Shh.
Well, we talked about what to end with. We thought maybe we should end with that because it's kind of a perfect way to go back out into the world with a quiet mind. But we decided to do something else instead. This is not a quiet time. This one is called Sleeping for Science. Some health problems are interesting, even exotic, but I have one that's mundane and rather boring. Still, it's in the news, with articles on the subject appearing constantly in newspapers and magazines, and probably on blogs too. It's insomnia. And frankly, I don't like to mention it because in spite of its popularity in the media, it's something that normal, well-adjusted people aren't supposed to have. Normal people sleep. It's the easiest thing in the world. Phil can fall asleep on the couch or even on the front row of a theater. I can hardly fall asleep anywhere. Now try all the remedies anyone suggests. Reading tiresome books, eating a cookie, not eating a cookie, drinking warm milk or chamomile tea, doing yoga, listening to soft music, going to bed at the same time every night, avoiding bright lights at bedtime, avoiding late dinners and chocolate, sniffing lavender oil, even sleeping alone. But nothing works. Insomniacs don't get much sympathy, I've noticed, as if it must be their own fault for not eating properly or exercising right or getting enough vitamins or using the right mattress. I remember having dinner at a friend's house about 40 years ago when the phone rang. My friend's father, a highly respected physician, answered the phone, listened to his patient for a few minutes, and said, "Well, nobody ever died of insomnia." Then he returned to the dinner table. For a long time, I blamed my problem on hormones. And then finally, I called a local university that does research on sleep and signed up for a study on insomnia. A few days later, I went for the sleep study interview. A bright young research associate with a PhD told me that more and more Americans are experiencing some form of insomnia, and that this study will help doctors make better evaluations in order to offer better treatment. I liked the idea of contributing to science while maybe learning something about my own problem. She asked me to fill out several surveys, wear a wrist monitor 24 hours a day for a week, keep a sleep log every night for 2 weeks, and come back the next week to sleep in the lab for 2 consecutive nights. That sounded a lot like punishment for people who have trouble sleeping, but the research associate assured me that most people say the lab experience is not as bad as they thought it would be. Well, for me, it was worse. I arrived on a dark and stormy night a couple of hours before bedtime, as instructed, and was greeted by 2 technicians, Bert and Hans, not their real names. They showed me the room where I would be sleeping or not sleeping. It was small and stark and felt like a cell. They pointed out the various monitors, including a video camera so they could see me and a microphone so they could hear me. They showed me where the wires would go through a hole in the wall and hook up to a computer where they would watch my brain waves and breathing patterns and anything else they wanted to see. What wires? What wires, I wondered. Soon I knew, for Hans started putting sensors on me. Sensors that were attached to wires or cables. By the time he finished, I had 7 electrodes glued to my head, 5 on my face, 2 on my chest, and 2 on each leg. Then he taped an electrode with his own cord to my left index finger and finished off the job by tying 2 belt-like bands around me, one around my torso and one around my upper chest. Finally, he secured a patch on my upper lip. He told me that one woman did yoga all night, and I wondered how, since with the size of the room and the restriction of the wires, the only yoga pose a body could get into would be the corpse. In bed at last, I tried to be as still as a corpse, because even the tiniest movement magnified the feeling of the strange things attached to my body, especially the ones on my face. I tried to stay calm, practicing all the meditation techniques I knew, and saying a prayer about surrendering that a friend had given me for the occasion. The bed squeaked, the cords were strained, the glue patches irritated. It was not a good night. The next day I dragged myself around in exhaustion, glad that I had cleared my calendar so I didn't have to do anything more difficult than wash my hair. That turned out to be harder than I thought. The glue didn't come out. I hated the thought of going back to the Sleep Lab motel, but I dutifully returned for my second night. This time it was just Bert and a large, friendly fellow who was there for a test of some kind. This fellow sat in a nearby chair, while I again spent well over an hour being fixed up like a character from a bad science fiction film. The fellow talked about hazelnut coffee from Kenya and a tour of America that would consist of going only to places that have Dunkin' Donuts. I didn't know whether he was not making sense or whether I was too tired to follow what he was saying. He needed a face mask for his test, and Bert, after making a search and some phone calls, told him that the face masks weren't there and asked him to come back next week. Then Bert announced that something was wrong with my computer hook, or maybe the software, and it was making some of the waves illegible. The technical expert was on vacation in California. So he phoned Hans at home and went over every step of the process. And then I clicked the box XYZ. Should I have done that? I heard him say the leg channels had gone black on the screen and the tall yellow line was moving. I felt like screaming and racing out into the rain, comparing my bad attitude with that of the friendly fellow who had said, "No problem," and sauntered off, promising to return. I mumbled the I surrender prayer and wondered if I would return if the unexpected technical difficulties gave me a reprieve. Fortunately, I didn't have to make that decision since, after a lengthy consultation, Bert gave a cheer and the study continued. I do hope the researchers learned something. I certainly did. First, I learned that there's no medical reason why I can't sleep. Second, I learned that a combination of hair conditioner and almond oil will get glue out of hair in only 6 washings. Finally, I learned that next time I'm bothered by minor discomforts in bed, I should remember the sensors attached to my face, and nothing else will seem so bad. Maybe I'll even relax and go to sleep.